Hello folks and welcome back to Crazy Boulders channel. In today's update I'm going to be going over the Steam VR OpenXR support that's been added in a recent update. Now I'm a little bit late on this unfortunately, but I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention because this means a lot of really big things. Now I am by no means an expert. There are a lot of people that can explain what OpenXR is and why it's important, but I'll just touch on the major points and why it's going to be important to you as gamers, or if you're a developer, why you may want to really take notice, because this is really huge news. Now, just a little bit ago in 2020, the Oculus Quest got updates for the OpenXR API, and this is again big. And the reason why this is also big is because the OpenXR API is platform agnostic, and what that really means is if you're somebody who develops in Unity, if you're developing on Unreal, if you're developing in CryEngine, whatever other engine it is that you're developing for, you are able to then take your game without too many specific changes and basically deploy it to any number of different platforms. So be it the Steam VR platform, be it the Oculus platform, or any other number of different kind of software versions that exist out there for VR. And this is great news, especially for developers, because it means that there's less overhead. You're no longer having to run the specific custom APIs from each different kind of VR environment, and you're able to just deploy it to all various kinds of hardware with ease without having to refactor all your code to make sure that it's all compatible and running completely fine. Now, as a gamer, what this means to you is that there's going to be less developer cost, and that means they can pass down that lower pricing for them onto you, which means savings for you in the VR space. Essentially, it also means that games for VR are going to be developed a little bit faster once this becomes a little bit more standard. And now with the big forces like Oculus and Steam fully going forward with support on this, this only means good news for all of us. In essence, what we're going to see is a lot more compatibility across the various stores. So whereas previously, if you bought a game from the Oculus store, but you only had Vive hardware, you had to use something like Revive, which is essentially a wrapper that emulates your Oculus hardware to be able to run on Vive, Windows Mixed Reality, and other headsets. Now this is no longer something that potentially will be necessary, as you'll be able to use your hardware essentially across all of these stores without really having to swap back and forth. And that also means that if you have a favorite VR headset that you want to use for your favorite games, regardless of where they were published, as long as they have the OpenXR support, you will be fine. Now, the one downside is that the onus is now on the developers to implement this so that all of their games support this, and unfortunately Facebook being Facebook and them wanting to keep a rather tight kind of control over their own ecosystem on the Oculus store, it may be kind of a while before we see this implemented. But the other really nice thing, again, is that you're going to see a lot more games come ported over from one store over to the other. So potentially games that previously would only really be on something like the Oculus Quest, which again is a mobile device using the Snapdragon processor, again very different from what we find in the x86 architecture that we see on PC, and with all the x64 stuff that's been happening recently, essentially allowing it to run cross-platform without any major issues. And again, this is really big news because it means that you're going to see a lot more games cross-ported over with a lot more ease. And that also means that there's less hardware for you to buy, meaning that you can stick to one specific platform that you like and continue playing all of your games across the board this way, which again is a huge boon to consumers because VR hardware is already expensive enough as it is in this day and age, and of course getting into VR is pretty nice if you're able to afford it, but now that barrier essentially drops, allowing a lot more people to get in on this, and specifically a lot more developers. The other benefit, of course, is that previously with things like Windows Mixed Reality, you had to run a specific application just to get those to work on Steam VR, which again just adds another layer, which means it's adding a little bit of extra latency to the whole experience, which can detract from the way that you are playing the games, potentially resulting in dropped frames, etc. Again, with OpenXR, this is something that gets eliminated because only a single API is being used without it having to have some kind of crosstalk with other kind of software being implemented on top of it, which can only mean, again, a better experience for you as a consumer, and again for the developers being able to sell their games on more storefronts without being basically saddled with all the development debt that they would otherwise incur, having to support all these different platforms simultaneously. Because as you might understand, something like the Oculus system is very different from what's happening in the Steam Vive tracking space in terms of their room tracking and room scale, but also it's going to be different from what you see in Windows Mixed Reality by quite a fair bit. Again, this being able to eliminate that bottleneck from the development, meaning that everything is going to be a lot more seamless and a lot more smooth moving forward. And the other benefit on top of this as well is that now we're going to probably see a lot more AR headsets coming into the fold, meaning that not only will you be able to play your games in your VR HMDs, but if you happen to get some AR goggles at some point down the line, using them with your Oculus titles or even in Steam VR is going to become a cinch, which is huge news, especially for somebody, like me, who is not only a content creator, but I also like to do a different number of things such as editing and being able to basically draw CAD in VR or AR, and being able to overlay that immediately and have it all be done within the Steam VR home interface, or if you so choose the Oculus interface. It's going to be up to you once this stuff really finally rolls out and the dust settles just a little bit. And of course, this can only be better news for the industry as a whole, because I think with the development costs now dropping significantly for them to be able to get into this space, we should see an uptick in the titles being released across the various ecosystems, which also means that potentially we may even see a lot more AR adoption from the existing VR headsets that have pass-through cameras, again because this particular API is going to be able to help basically democratize this space, allowing for more people to create apps seamlessly that'll work across a huge multitude of devices. Now, moving forward, I think that this will be really important because the fragmentation in the VR space has been a really big deal for quite a long time. And I think it's fairly safe to agree that pretty much all of us have been rather frustrated having to look at the different setups that everybody has, and especially if you're somebody who's been into using something like Revive, like myself, where you're constantly having to troubleshoot various different problems, and even if people have the same setup in terms of hardware, they're getting different errors and different issues just because of the different setup on their particular computer. And this is something that will be potentially completely eliminated when we go with the OpenXR platform, because again, you're not going to be stuck basically in that specific space using that specific platform that you're stuck using before. And this can only mean good things for the rest of us. Ultimately, I think that this will be huge news across the board, and I'm not sure why not enough people are drumming this up to be as big of a deal as it is, because now with heavyweights like Valve and Oculus really pushing forward in this technology space, we're only going to see more and more people coming into the fold, which ultimately also means we'll see a lot more people coming into VR that previously may have found the hurdles on the technical side to be just a little bit too much, and possibly the frustration of having to set up all of their hardware and have it not work across the other titles that they have in their various libraries. So hopefully at some point down the road, we're really going to see this have an uptick in the industry to the point where eventually we'll basically be able to play everything cross titles. Basically cross-buy is going to be a lot more of a big deal. And personally, I've been a huge proponent of crossplay across the various systems. I've been really happy that Sony did this with their Vita and PlayStation 3 and 4 titles in certain cases, where just because you bought it on one store didn't mean that you were locked out on playing it on the other consoles, because you already had the other version available to download when you so chose. And I think this is a really important factor because, again, if you're somebody that may like a certain ecosystem better, before you had to go out and buy the game on that store, and it would only be supported by that specific level of hardware that you had, and if you didn't, you were pretty much locked out and had to go out and buy more, again, which is basically putting the burden on the consumer to be able to adapt to the environment that was VR back in the day. So hopefully, again, moving forward, this is something that we'll see become a bit more of a standard in different other areas, and hopefully it means that a lot more people will be able to have the choice of choosing the engine that they want to run with, and then being able to send this out to all the various other platforms out there, being that they can now send their games and make sure that they work on Android platforms, on Windows, on whatever else they may be using, allowing for a much more seamless VR experience for everyone. So this has been a pretty short video explaining a little bit of why OpenXR in Steam is going to be a huge deal, especially if you're somebody who's been looking forward to playing a lot of games that otherwise would previously be locked to other game stores. And hopefully you liked the video, and if you want to see more content like this, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll keep bringing you more awesome VR news as the story unfolds.